Hi, I'm Chad, and this is my 2017 Aprilia Tuono V4 1100 factory. Now, if you're new to my channel, you should know that I absolutely love this motorcycle and pretty much everything about it. It's a blast to ride, it's absolutely stunning to look at, and it just makes me really happy. So there is one thing though that I thought could be improved on the bike, especially the way that I purchased it. And it's not something that's been a high priority for me because it really isn't that big of an issue in my opinion, but something that I did want to eventually address is the front turn signals. Now, these are not the worst front turn signals that I've seen on a motorcycle, but especially being that this is not an old bike, just the basic halogen bulb in a little housing is kind of basic and doesn't really go the best with the rest of the aesthetic of the bike in my opinion, especially with the nice LED taillight and the fact that the previous owner of this bike installed a fender eliminator kit that has LED turn signals. So today we have a set of LED front turn signals from New Rage Cycles that are a more slim and aerodynamic design, and we're going to see just how easy these are to install on the bike. Now, New Rage Cycles claims that these are a plug and play product. I have had a lot of experience installing aftermarket lighting and turn signals on previous bikes of mine, and generally speaking, they usually require some additional wiring, but New Rage seems to say that this is not going to be the case here, and we're going to put that to the test. So let's take a look inside the box, see what we've got, and get started. All right, so opening up the box here. Ooh, nicely packaged, a lot of foam. So these are the signals themselves. Got our little pin connectors here. Got some zip ties and some heat shrink wrap, as well as a little card that tells us where to go for instructions. So initial impressions on quality, they're very weighted. They feel nice and solid. They're not floppy. They don't click or rattle or make any kind of weird sounds. So I'm impressed so far. I am interested to see though what the OEM connectors look like if they are just pins. If they are, this should be pretty straightforward and easy. If they're not, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but we will see. All right, so we are gonna start by removing the 4mm hex bolt that holds on the turn signal right here. So just again, your 4mm hex bit in your ratchet. I like to use an extension so that I don't hit the ratchet on the fairing, but pretty straightforward. Oh no, we lost our little washer. I'll grab that later. All right, so from here, I'm gonna go ahead and do this. And as you see, we've got a little bit of wire right here. So we're just gonna carefully pull this out. A little bit of tension on it now. I think it's coming through a zip tie. So just give it some firm pressure, but should come out all right. Okay. I think we're at the end of our rope here. And yep, we're pulling on where the harness plugs in to the rest of the main harness. So I don't see or feel any kind of connector here. I'm not really sure what our next step is going to be in that regard. Wonder, there's a piece of blue tape on one of the wires. I wonder if that is some heat shrink that is covering up the connector. I don't think I have enough slack on here to get it out through here. Let's see if we can go around the side of the fairing. Put that back on for a second. Okay, so there we have it. Although, yep, there are no pin connectors in here. I'm pretty sure about that. Let's take the tape off and just be certain. Yeah, it would appear not. Just some blue tape wrapped around the wire for whatever reason to get me all excited for nothing. So I'm kind of at a loss right now because I don't see any pin connectors along this entire wire, and even all the way back up to the main connection between the two turn signals to the harness, There's nothing here. So I'm not really sure what my next step should be, unless possibly there's pin connectors within here. But even then, I'm not really sure how to take this apart, but I guess we can give it a shot and see what happens. It feels like this piece right here that actually mounts to the bike should just pop out of the actual turn signal housing, but I'm having a really hard time getting it to do that. Of course, I don't want to squeeze too hard and break the plastic, but you know things are not going according to plan when you get a flathead screwdriver out to try to pry the thing apart. Boy. Well, I sure did it. Guess let's take the cover off the turn signal and see if we can get the rest out, but it came apart and looks like it might not have actually broken. And there we go. We have our pin connectors. So, it's one of those things that they don't explain well in the instructions. Something we've already found here, but we do have them. So we're gonna go ahead and disconnect. I believe they said the dark blue wire was the ground, so we're gonna take that out first, followed by the light blue. Oh no, and it does look like we did break the signal. Well, at least we got our pin connectors. Hopefully we should just be able to slip this right off here. So before we try plugging in the turn signal to make sure everything works, we're gonna go ahead and take the shrink wrap, the heat shrink, and just slide our connectors through here, because if it does work, don't wanna have to take everything apart again to get the heat shrink tubing on. So we're gonna take our turn signal now. We've got our red wire here. It's gonna be positive and black is gonna be ground. So again, according to the instructions online by New Rage Cycles, it says that dark blue is the ground on the bike. So we're gonna plug the red wire of the turn signal into the light blue wire on the bike. Make sure we get a nice and tight connection there. And then we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing with the black wire to the dark blue wire. So next, before we go any further than this, I'm gonna spread the wires nice and far apart, because we're gonna test the signal out and make sure it works, and we definitely do not want the positive cable and the negative cable, or the ground cable, making contact with each other, because we could start sparks and damage things. So got the signal here, nice wide gap here. Let's take the key for the bike, slide it on in, turn it on, and we have a turn signal. Fantastic. So as you can see, it's not hyper blinking, and that is because I actually have either a resistor kit or resistors already wired in for the rear turn signals on my bike. The previous owner had installed a fender eliminator kit that had LED turn signals, and they've never hyper blinked before, so I'm assuming that there's resistors in there, but it's nice to see that these work just as they should. Turn them off, kill the bike. Now let's wrap these up in some electrical tape before we put the heat shrink on, to make sure that they never, ever, ever make contact with each other, because that would be really bad. Go ahead and we'll start with the positive. So we want to try to get as tight of a wrap as possible. I highly recommend starting on a little bit of the wire casing too, just to make sure that you have some overlap. Bring that up through there. The top here, pull it just a little tighter. One of the nice things with electrical tape is that it is stretchy. So there we go, should be all good there. We're just gonna do exactly the same thing with the negative. Wrap that up nice and well. So we're gonna take our heat shrink tubing, slide it on over all this stuff if we can. It might be kind of tough to do because we've thickened these up quite a bit. So a little disappointing there that the heat shrink isn't the right size for this, because to get this over, you would have had to have both of those wires touching each other, and that would have been a very bad time for you and your motorcycle. So that's a little disappointing there. We need to go to the hardware store and buy a little bit more heat shrink tape. In all honesty, a better solution for this might just be to wrap everything else in electrical tape. So that's nice and tight. Go ahead and turn the key on one last time just to make sure that we don't get any smoke or anything from right here and that the wires aren't hot. Signal's going good. Oh, everything feels good. Nice and cool. No smoke coming from anywhere. So I'd say our electrical taping job was well done. And the last thing we can do here is just take our lighter, put it right there just to shrink that up. Don't do that on the electrical tape. So now we get to slide all this wiring back in through here. I have to figure out what to do with all that later. Here we have it. The next step is to remove the screws from the bottom of the bracket, because I think we're going to need to take the turn signal itself off of the bracket to get the bracket on here, and we'll reassemble. So 2 Phillips head screws, very small, but I did notice I tried to use a small screwdriver and couldn't get quite enough torque on them to break them loose. So this is Phillips head 1 bit that I'm just using on my ratchet, and that seemed to do the trick. It's just tight enough that you can get into the screw without stripping it. And try not to lose these into our handy magnetic bolt tray for security. And again, I'm doing this on the bottom side of the bracket. So the actual bracket itself is the bottom piece. That's where it's going to bolt up to the bike. So we need to get this off of the turn signal so that we can easily mount it up. Did better not to drop that time. Just let our turn signal hang there for a moment. So now that we have our bracket, before we go ahead and mount this up to the bike, we're gonna slip all these wires back through here so that they are not in the way, because we're gonna have a limited amount of space with this thing once we get it back on. Just let those kind of hang out there for a moment. I'll line that up, get our bolts in and started. Get it nice and tightened up. There we go. Just a little bit of clearance between the fairing and the signal. Perfect. Just enough space to slide these the rest of the way through. Our first signal. All we need to do is put the screws back in, which not a lot of clearance to do so here. We're going to start with the front one because that looks to be the easiest. The rear screw up from under here. Literally, you can flex this just a little bit too to get the necessary space that you're going to need. Luckily, Aprilia made these flexible. Not a lot of clearance here between the fairing and the rear screw, so just be careful. Try not to scratch your nice decal. Nice. And voila, it is installed. On this side at least. So hopefully now that we know that the pin connectors are actually in the housing for the turn signal, we won't break it this time on the other side. Ooh, that does look pretty cool though. So now that we have identified that the pin connectors are actually in the housing for the OEM turn signal, hopefully this side will be a little bit easier. This bolt is free. put it in our magnetic tray, scoot it back, pull it out a little bit. So I'm gonna change it up just a little bit here, and I'm actually gonna remove the screw here because I think that might prevent the little plastic cover from breaking. So this is just a little Phillips head screw. It's the one right here. Get that out of there in our tray, and it looks like it should just pop right out. Nice and easy. Put that somewhere safe. Now we're just gonna do the same thing we did last time. Oh, we don't even need to. Look at that, slid right out, beautiful. Okay, so got 2 pins here. Got dark blue and we have red now, so fantastic. I'm going to assume that, again, dark blue is the ground, and we're gonna try based on that and see what happens, but let's get these connectors out of here now. So again, our dark blue is the ground, so we're gonna wanna connect that to the black wire on the turn signal. So we're gonna go red to red here. Nice firm connection. And we're gonna go black to blue. Space these out nice and far apart so there's no chance of them arcing. Gonna take our key on the bike, put it in the ignition, turn the bike on, and presto. Works just the same, flashes at the correct rate, again because I'm assuming my bike already has the resistors installed from my fender eliminator kit. So fantastic here. Turn the bike off, of course, and remove the key just to be extra safe. And we're just gonna do the same thing we did on the other side and wrap this up in electrical tape. We're gonna have some additional wires here just like we did on the other side, and we're gonna have to finagle those into the bike and zip tie them somehow, some way. Make sure these are nice and secure. And start as low as we can on the wire, get as much coverage as possible. Not even gonna bother with the heat shrink wrap this time since it wasn't big enough. So we're done there. Now we're just going to go ahead and tape them together so that it's a little bit easier to fit these somewhere, keep them together and orderly. Go ahead and slip those in. We'll figure out exactly where we're going to zip tie them a little bit later, but for now let's go ahead and finish up the install. So again, we need to remove the actual signal itself from the bottom bracket. So we're just going to go ahead, get our Phillips bit and loosen these screws up again. Be careful not to lose them. So again, we've got our signal free of the bracket. I'm gonna slide that up in front here. Go ahead and fit the brackets. Again, being careful not to scratch our fairing. So we have it lined up about right. I'm gonna take the mounting screw, get it started. Again, being careful to leave a little bit of clearance here between the bracket and the fairing. Try to get it again how you want it, with just a little bit of clearance, but so that it is straight. Go ahead and hold it and just snug it up one last time. Voila. Just go ahead and slide this guy back on in here. We will again need to finagle this bracket with the little screws that we have here on the underside. This is the trickiest part of this install, if you ask me, besides locating the connector pins. These don't need to be super tight. But at the same time, you don't want them to be too loose. There we go. Not bad. And then from here, sliding in, just need to do something with these wires here. We want to make sure that these are nice and secure and out of the way. Don't want them to be getting into any kind of trouble. Fortunately, there's a bunch of stuff over here. You can either zip tie them up forward, more towards the inside of the bike. There are actually some wires already there and another zip tie. You can zip tie it to the zip tie if you wanted to. Well, much easier the second time around now that we knew exactly what to do. As you can see, the red and blue wires right there, the wires for the signals, I just zip tied them to that small wire right there, which I think might also be the turn signals, believe it or not. But then just went ahead and tucked up the rest of the wires inside the fairing. Pretty easy to do, and can't even really see anything different. So pretty clean install, and they look great, I gotta say. Very clean. And then I actually did need to go ahead and zip tie up the wires on the other side too. Just did off camera because my GoPro died, unfortunately, but I'll give you a little glimpse of what's going on in there. I actually cut the zip tie, ran that up, and looped it in through the little clip thing that's up in there. I don't know if you can see that. And that made it possible to secure the wires and get them all out of the way. And there we have it. So overall, I am quite happy with the finished product. I think the turn signals look great, and the design of them is really complementary to the bike's body styling and body language already. So I think these are a fantastic product. The fit and finish is pretty nice too. They're very solid and well put together. Only little thing that kind of gets me is that you can see the screws that secure the top plate on from the top side of the bike. Bottom side, not so much because nobody's looking at that, but that's just maybe my only piece of feedback into making them look a little bit cleaner. Outside of that, the installation process was not too difficult. The only issue that I encountered was my confusion in the instructions. Clearly I misunderstood the instructions. So now that I understand, it makes a little bit more sense looking back at the directions, what it was trying to explain, but I did end up chasing a wire all the way up into my main harness for all the lights. So it would have been nice to avoid that, but now you don't have to at least. And hopefully New Rage Cycles can modify their instructions guide just to call that out specifically, that those connectors are within the turn signal housing. And they can add another image to show what that looks like, since there are only 4 pictures. But outside of that, these are a fantastic product. Again, they look awesome. They're super bright. And one of the other things that I really like about these signals too is that they wrap all the way around the side of the signal body itself. So traffic that's on the side of you will actually be able to see the signal, whereas with the OEM signals, they only face forward. So you get some added visibility there and a little bit better protection and safety. I'd give it an 8 out of 10. Again, if we could clean that up so there's not these 2 screws that are up top showing right here, or maybe gloss over that piece of the metal a little bit as well, just to make it match with the rest of the black that's on the bike and improve that install guide, I'd say this is a 10 out of 10 product. But nevertheless, highly recommend these if you are looking for an aftermarket turn signal solution for your Tuono V4 and you want to get rid of the big bulbous ones. These are a great way to go. They look awesome. I'm super happy with them and would recommend. But with that, I'm gonna wrap this one up. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a gentle little click of the like button and consider subscribing for more Tuono V4 factory content. And drop a comment below. Let me know if you have these signals, if you found the same kind of confusion in your installation process, or if I just am totally clueless and misread things. Drop another comment below too if you have a different set of turn signals or have been shopping for these, and if this video is helpful at all. I'd love to just talk and get your feedback on this. Thanks again so much for watching, and I'll hope to catch you in the next one. Until then, later.